Thank you, Dr. Nki and Dr. Mawele. And good evening to all the entrepreneurs, professionals on the platform. I'm gonna switch off my video as well. I just switched it on just for introduction. I'm gonna switch it off and then start with my presentation. Just anyone to confirm if my slides are showing?
Yes,
yes, they are.
right. Yeah, thank you.
All right. No, thanks for this opportunity, and we appreciate the invitation. So in terms of Sifa, by way of background, Sifa, we are an implementing agency of the Department of Small Business Development. So under the Department of Small Business Development, you've got two implementing agencies, ourselves, Sifa, and our role and mandate is to provide development finance. I'll unpack that later, what I mean by that. And parallel to us, we've got our sister agency called SEDA, Small Enterprise Development Agency. The role and mandate of SEDA is to provide business development support services. So anything non-financial is the mandate of SEDA. So this evening, we're mainly focusing on Sifa, which is the development funding institution under DSBD. So just high level, our operating model. So we do quite a number of things as Sifa, but in the interest of time, I would focus on the activities that are relevant to the platform or the audience this evening. So we have got a suite of regional offices. So let me start by saying our target market is SMMEs, small, medium, and micro enterprises, as well as cooperatives. So we deliver our offerings or our products through a suite of regional offices. So we've got offices in all the 9 provinces. The offices that we do have are mainly located in the main cities. For instance, if you look at a province like KwaZulu-Natal, we'll have an office in eThekwini. You look at Northern Cape, we'll have an office in Kimberley, etc., etc. But what we also do is we co-locate with other partners such as SEDA to make sure that we reach out to the deepest areas in a particular province. So the model that we have as Sifa is what we call a hybrid model. And by a hybrid model, it means we are able to provide funding directly to SMMEs. And in this case, that will be our main focus of discussion. But we also have what we call a wholesale lending platform. Through wholesale lending, we provide funding to intermediaries, and these are the intermediaries that will on-lend to SMMEs and cooperatives. But for the purpose of this evening, I'll focus mainly, like I said, on the direct lending channel. The direct lending channel, we provide funding, the minimum of which is 50,000 rand. We don't do anything below 50,000 rand, and the maximum is 15 million rand, 15 million. So I did say that we are an implementing agency of the department, but we are a subsidiary of the Industrial Development Corporation. So in terms of the thresholds, anything which is bigger than that, as you know, that IDC provide loans or equity or whatever support to big industries, and we focus on SMMEs and cooperatives. So in terms of the criteria of the things that we do, that is the slide that talks about who is eligible to apply for Sifa funding. So when you look at that in terms of the criteria, you have to be a South African citizen or have permanent residence. So that is the one part. The other part is that we focus on registered entities. It could be PTYs, it could be CCs, those who still have CCs, but we still do sole traders, though we don't necessarily, we encourage those businesses that run as sole traders to register those businesses, because in the main, you separate your personal affairs from your business affairs. If you're running, you separate by way of those legal structures being CCs or PTYs. Now, the other thing that we also check is that if anyone is applying for Sifa funding, the business must operate within South Africa. So unlike our holding company being the IDC, the IDC can fund outside South Africa, but as Sifa, we only focus on businesses that operate within the Republic. In terms of corporate governance, we check everything in terms of compliance. It could be legal compliance, it could be industry compliance. Like in this case, in the health industry, as it were, I'm sure there are certain things that has to do with compliance, by way of industry compliance. So we do check those things. If you're a medical practitioner, for instance, there are certain things that you need to abide by. We check those type of things to make sure that before we provide the funding, we are compliant in terms of those type of aspects. We have got also what we call, if you approach Sifa for funding, you need to give us some form of a written proposal or a business plan that gives us an idea, high level, in terms of what is it that you would like to do. Unless you've got a contract, but some of the clients that we do support have got contracts and they're looking just for working capital to service those contracts. And in that instance, obviously will not require a business plan or a funding proposal. But in an instance where you do not have a contract, we then say you must give us a funding proposal. Towards the end of my presentation, I will unpack what that funding proposal must contain. The other one on the G, we're saying you need to demonstrate a character or ability to repay the loan. So in addition to looking at your business or your business plan or your business model or business case, we check the character of an entrepreneur, to say that things like your credit record, we do check those things. And I will come and explain later how we deal in terms of things like credit bureau, people that are under debt review, et cetera, et cetera. But in terms of the credit record of our clients, we do check those type of things. The other thing is that if you apply for Sifa funding, the majority shareholder needs to be an owner-manager of the business. So you can't be doing this on a part-time basis. You need to be saying that a majority shareholder must be there looking at the day-to-day running of the business. And we also check your compliance with SARS. You need to give us a valid tax return. So in terms of eligibility criteria, that is that. If you tick these boxes, then it then means, therefore, you're passing the first quality gate. You can apply for Sifa funding. The next level, obviously, will be the issues of the due diligence, which are affected. Target market, we've got what we call the priority target group or designated groups. We prioritize Black entrepreneurs, we prioritize women and owned and managed businesses, we prioritize youth owned and managed businesses, entrepreneurs with disabilities, businesses that operate in rural and townships, as well as military veterans. It doesn't mean that if we say we prioritize women, as an example, we can't finance businesses that are not run by women. It's a question of priority. We prioritize those type of designated groups. Sectors, again, priority sectors, your service, your manufacturing, agriculture, construction, mining, green economy, and information and technology. Again, colleagues, it doesn't mean that we can't cover other sectors. We do cover other sectors, but these are just by way of priority. The instruments that we do have, which are lending instruments under direct lending, it's only debt funding. So under Sifa, we don't provide equity. So when we support businesses, we provide debt funding in the sense that you still keep the ownership of your business, and the relationship that you'll have with Sifa is that of you repaying a debt. We don't buy equity into businesses. Some of the DFIs in the country, I'm sure you know that they do have those type of instruments where you can do equity transactions, but we do not at Sifa do equity transactions. We only provide debt funding. So the first instrument that I need to share is what we call the asset finance. So through this instrument, we're able to assist businesses to purchase machinery, equipment, or any type of an asset that can be identified by way of a unique serial number. So some of our clients, in terms of capital expenditure, they'll come and apply for for funding. Part of the funding will be for working capital, but part of the funding will be to acquire assets. And assets are not the same. So this asset finance instrument is actually for those type of assets that can be uniquely been identified by a unique number, like I said, your machinery and your equipment. The benefits of this really is that that type of an asset becomes the first security for Sifa. We don't fund based on security. So if our applicants, our clients, they've got security, obviously we'll take that security. However, it's not the first question that we ask. We fund based on your business case, we fund based on cash flows, and the assets that we do fund they become the first security that we register. So that is the asset finance. The other one is a term loan, very similar to asset finance in a sense, but the difference with this instrument is that we use this to finance other forms of assets, your office furniture, your fixtures, your fittings, simply because those type of assets, they look the same. You can't differentiate office furniture on an office chair, on a desk. There are two desks, as in the same. They look very, very much the same. So that is why we separate between asset finance and a term loan. But you don't have to worry much about understanding what is an asset finance, what is a term loan. All you need to know when you apply for Sifa funding is to then say, this is what I need to purchase. I need to purchase XYZ. This is how much I need from you guys. And our deal makers will be the ones that will be able to advise that this part of the asset will finance through a term loan or through asset finance. We also have what we call bridging loan. Bridging loan, before I come to bridging loans, by the way, under the term loan, we are able to fund working capital because it's not only capital expenditure that businesses need. Some of the businesses will need operating expenses, for working capital. It could be rental, it could be whatever form of working capital. So we can fund that through a term loan. The other instrument that we do have is what we call bridging loan. A bridging loan, we provide this instrument to those clients that have got contracts. Some of our clients will come to Sifa with offtake agreements. They come with those type of contracts, and we look at those contracts and then say, you will need certain amount of financial resources to execute on those contracts, and then we provide that through the bridging loan. So you cannot get a bridging loan if you don't have a valid offtake agreement. The last one is your revolving credit, but this one mainly is for those clients that are coming to Sifa for the second, third application. Because some of our clients, let's say someone has got a contract with a particular offtake, and the value of the contract, argument's sake, is 10 million rands, and the duration of that contract maybe it's a 3-year contract. So what happens is that the first purchase order that they get, we will have to look at that purchase order and then check how they are repaying on that purchase order. Remember now that if it's that kind of a contract, like I described it, as a 10-year, there's a 3-year contract, value being the 10 million rand as an example. So within that duration of the contract, you can get multiple purchase orders. So what we don't want is that for the second, third purchase order, the clients need to come back and make a fresh application. So the first PO, purchase order, will do a thorough due diligence, but going forward, we can have like an overdraft type of a facility where you can revolve as an existing client. So in the main, this type of an instrument it's applicable to those Sifa clients that are coming for the second or third application. The documentation that we need, and there's a reason we're sharing this slide, because when you apply for funding, when you apply for Sifa funding, we are governed by what we call the National Credit Act. And the National Credit Act, there are certain basic things that the Act expects us to do as a lender. One is you need to know your client. So there is that regulation that know your client. When you provide funding to someone, you need to understand, you need to know exactly who are you lending to. So that is the first part. The second part is the issue of affordability. So you cannot provide a loan to someone who cannot afford that particular loan because that is defined as reckless lending. And I'm sharing this, colleagues, because when you look at a list of the documents that we require, in one way or the other, they are helping us to get information in terms of what I've just described, be it know your client in terms of understanding who you're lending to, and also understanding that this particular business can afford the loan that we are providing. So unlike a commercial bank, we don't have transaction accounts as an example. So if you've got a transaction account with a bank, you've got your check account or your savings account, whatever, the bank in a way begin to understand your behavior through the transactions that you have through your account. But with Sifa, we don't have that. We only provide that funding. So if someone comes to Sifa and apply for funding tomorrow, it will be for the first time that we get to know about that particular entrepreneur and also to get to know about their business. So we need to dig deeper in terms of saying, what is the information that we do need? So I will not go line by line. It's very straightforward things in terms of documentation that we need. We'll share the presentation. But the reason we're sharing this is then to say, if you are applying for funding from Sifa or any lender for that matter, it's very crucial that you submit all the required documentation, because if you don't, the deal makers at the other side of the table, they are not able to process the transaction. So, and also to understand that the list that you have is because we are providing funding in line with the National Credit Act. So like I said, colleagues, I won't go through this, very straightforward things. If there's a need, Doc, towards the end for me to come back to this and go into individual line item, I can do that. But like I said, we'll share the presentation, which is very straightforward things. And the other thing, again, is then when you go through this, you also understand or see that some of the things may not be applicable to your business. So it looks like a big list, but some of the things is as and when applicable. Maybe the one that I need to talk about is number 16, because there could be a question around this towards the end. So the issue of the court judgment, we do provide funding to people that have got default judgments. If we go and check your credit record and you've got a court judgment and that court judgment hasn't been rescinded, it means you haven't paid it off, then we won't be able to provide funding, because you will start a business and you do have a court judgment. Your creditor can come back anytime and then take whatever you have. If you put money in a bank account, as an example, they can go before us and then have access to those type of resources. But if you've got a default judgment is not a court judgment. It's just that you have defaulted on the payments. We're able to look at that kind of a transaction, provided you've made arrangements with your creditors. So that is the one that I thought, let me explain, because there might be a question around that towards the end. This is a continuation in terms of documentation required, but this is in line with the instruments that I've presented before. So if you're looking for a term loan or an asset finance and you don't have a contract, then we'll need a business plan. I'll unpack that business plan towards the end. And what must support that business plan are cash flow projections or a lease agreement if you're a tenant. Some of these businesses that we support are franchises, and then we'll also look at franchise agreements. Some of our clients, like I said before, they've got contracts. If you've got a contract, there's no need for a business plan for bridging loan applications. It's just a question of saying, you must give us a project plan, how you're going to execute on that contract, the copy of the contract, and also maybe you have completed similar projects in the past, then you need to give us those type of completion certificates for the things that you may have done. The things that we don't do, we've got what we call exclusions. One is we don't do property, real estate. We don't do that, but it doesn't mean that we cannot finance you if you're saying I'm operating a business, I also want to buy that particular building. That we can do. It's not a speculative real estate business. By speculative real estate, we're just talking about those businesses where you want to build a block of flats and rent them out, or you want to develop property and people are going to apply for bonds, and that we don't do. But if you've got a contract, maybe it's low cost housing, we do those type of transactions. Things like student accommodation we can do because it's not speculative. Student accommodation is linked to a particular academic institution. So those type of transactions. The second one, we don't do existing debt. So you cannot come to SIF and say, I owe this bank or this institution. Can you guys pay them off and consolidate the debt? We don't refinance existing debt. If you're under debt review and you've been insolvent and not rehabilitated, we don't do those type of transactions. Or under business rescue or liquidation or under liquidation, we cannot tie those type of transactions. Anything that is illegal, I think this is obvious. We cannot do any illegal type of business. If people are in a business where you are either manufacturing or selling ammunition, we don't do that. Then non-profit organizations, we do not do. We are a development funding institution, so the transactions that we do need to give us some form of developmental impact. And by developmental impact, we're talking about either you're sustaining jobs or you're creating jobs, or you fall in those priority groups that I've just mentioned. But anything that does not give us developmental impact, we definitely do not do those type of transactions. Any business that is immoral in a sense, we don't do the gambling and the sale of tobacco, liquor, etc. Things that that when the Minister of Finance talk about the sin tax, those that fall in that category, we do not do. However, if you've got a supermarket and the supermarket is selling tobacco, we can do that because the main generator of revenue is not tobacco, as an example. If you've got a B&B and then you've got a bar in the corner there, we can do those type of transactions. But what it means here is that the main generator of revenue must not be those products that are listed out there. Anything that is not compliance in terms of SARS, any regulatory requirements we don't conform to, we won't be able to do that. The second last one is primary agriculture. Under direct lending, we don't do primary agriculture if you don't have an offtake. But under wholesale, we do have our partners that can do primary agriculture. And we're a subsidiary of the IDC, like I said. So if you're on the IDC delinquent register, we won't be able to assist you. The pricing structure, like I said before, we provide debt funding. We don't have equity. We do not have grants. We've got what we call blended finance. I'll talk about that later. But we mainly provide debt. The funding that we provide, we charge interest. So your interest, it will be prime plus some margin of risk, because what we'll do, we take a particular business or business case and put it into a pricing model, and that pricing model will tell us exactly the amount of interest or the margin of interest that we must charge above prime. It could be prime plus 2, prime plus 3. It will all depend. We've got special programs. The special programs, which again I will unpack later, these special programs, we don't charge interest rates that is based on prime, as an example. So under these special programs, we have got fixed type of interest rates. I will unpack these programs in the later stage. We've got Amorphous funding scheme, which is for entrepreneurs with disabilities. We've got what we call Township and Run Entrepreneurship program. We've got Amazon funding scheme for military veterans. And we've got small enterprise manufacturing support program. This is for those businesses that are in manufacturing. We also charge what we call an initiation fee, which is a once-off initiation fee. And it's actually informed by the value of the loan that you're looking for. So we charge anything between 1% and 5%. If you are coming to Sifa and you have got a contract and your loan duration is shorter, maybe it's a 12-month contract, you do not pay a lot of interest through that particular transaction. So then it means, therefore, the initiation fee that we charge will be a little bit higher, as opposed to someone who's coming to Sifa, they're applying for funding and they will repay that funding over 5 years. So for those type of transactions, you'll pay a maximum of 1% initiation. Why we're sharing this information is crucial, because when you apply for Sifa funding, you need to give us projections. And part of the projections are saying that if you're looking for 2 million rand, you must have an idea how much is this thing going to cost me by way of the once-off initiation fee, and also by way of interest, so that when you plot in your repayment in terms of your cash flows, you've got some information how to do that. This one is a scheme that we've got. It's called Amorphous funding scheme. This scheme is for entrepreneurs with disabilities, where we provide funding in line with our threshold, being 50,000 minimum and 15 million rand being the maximum. Here we charge interest rate, which is prime plus 5. And it's actually not even dependent on the risk that we see in a particular business. As long as an entrepreneur has got some form of a disability, we charge prime plus 5. I mean, prime plus 5, it's actually what is prime now? I think it's 7.5, if I'm not wrong. And then minus 5 is about 2.5. So that is very, very cheap funding that we provide through this scheme. The repayment is still 60 months, or we can stretch it depending on the cash flows that the businesses will present to us. What we also do through this scheme, we're also able to provide what we call pre-loan business support. We can assist these businesses to put together a business plan if we believe that the idea that they do have potentially is an idea that can work, and then we can assist them by funding the cost of a business plan, which is a grant, 5% of the loan amount up to a maximum of 75,000 rand. And we also provide post-loan support. And this is the mentorship support that we provide to this kind of businesses up to a maximum of 350,000. This one, Inyamazana funding scheme, very similar in terms of design to the previous one. This one, the interest rate there is 9%. I'm sure you'll ask yourself, why 9% when prime is now at 7.5? When this scheme was designed, prime was above 9%. But now we haven't reviewed this scheme simply because we are not getting a lot of applications under the scheme. So once we can have traction and then we have military veterans starting to apply, that interest rate, obviously, it will be reviewed. But what you see in front of you there is an interest rate that was a part of the program when it was introduced some 3-4 years ago. So in terms of the other things, the other elements for pre-loan support and post-loan support, we also provide to this Inyamazana funding scheme for military veterans. The other scheme that I would like to present is called the Small Enterprise Manufacturing Support Program. So this one is for those businesses that are in manufacturing. We provide funding to purchase machinery, equipment, working capital, or product accreditation, certification, and testing. Because remember now, when you're in manufacturing, those kind of things are required. You may want to do some accreditation of the product. You may want to do certification and testing. You may need machinery and working capital. So we are able to provide funding up to a maximum of 15 million rand to cover those elements that we have indicated up there. Here, the repayment can be up to 84 months. We also provide a moratorium, which is capital or interest, up to six months. The difference between this and the other schemes is that 20% of what you're applying for can be a grant up to a maximum of 2 million rand. So it's a blended finance instrument. Blended finance means it's a combination of a loan and a grant in one package. So if you give a simple example, let's say you're looking for 1 million rand, for instance. 200,000 of that can be a grant, 800,000 of that can be a loan. So it will depend. We take an application and put it into a matrix, and it will tell us the split between a grant and a loan. But the beauty about this is that it comes with a package which is not repayable, which is a grant. And the loan portion of it, it fetches an interest rate of only prime. So we don't come here and say it will be prime plus some margin of risk. It will only be prime interest rate. Because through this scheme, we're trying to promote localization. We're trying to promote where SMMEs need to manufacture and take advantage of the local value chains. So that is the scheme. Who's eligible to apply for this? It must be a registered business, 100% owned by South African citizens, at least 2 years in business. We normally don't do greenfields under the scheme unless you've got a strong business case where you've got strong offtakes, as an example. We can do that. in terms of ownership, 51% must be Black owned and managed, and it must be a business that is compliant in terms of tax, and you need to register on the SMME database that is managed by our department, which is DSPD. So this is the Small Enterprise Manufacturing Support Program. The last scheme, but this one I'll just go through this quickly. Given the nature of the platform, it may not necessarily be relevant, but you may know somebody who can take advantage of this. These schemes are called the Township and Run Entrepreneurship Programs. Now, the Township and Run Entrepreneurship Programs are the schemes that we introduced when COVID hit some 2 years back. Because the understanding was that during those times, we had those hard lockdowns, the economy started to open up. But as a department, DSBD portfolio, being DSBD Seed and Sifa, there was that realization that businesses that operate in township and rural areas will struggle to come back. We cannot just assume that they'll come back and start operating normally. So we introduced what we call the Township and Run Entrepreneurship Program, solely to support and restructure the economy of township and rural areas. So through these schemes, we are able to support all forms of businesses in townships, and rural areas. It could be clothing and textile, bakeries, chisanyamas, the retail outlet, the retail sector, being restaurant, the car washes, general dealers, the automotive, the personal care, artisans, and others. These are just by way of example. It doesn't mean that if a business does not fall within this category, we cannot assist. We can still assist this kind of businesses. Now, here we provide the combination of a loan and a grant again, but the maximum that we do provide is R1 million. So we can provide R1 million towards working capital, towards equipment, any form of capital expenditure, operating expenditure, and 100,000 of that can be a grant. Again, we'll take a business and put it into a matrix, and the matrix will tell us that if someone is looking for 100,000, out of that 100,000, 10,000 will be a grant, just to use a simple example. But we are focusing on supporting businesses that operate in township and rural areas. Maximum, again, like I said, it's R1 million, and the loan portion of that program, of that facility, we charge only 5%. So those are the TRAP programs, and our sister organization, SEDA, provides business development support. We provide the funding support, but SEDA provides business development support, which is anything non-financial. So like I said, this one, these programs, it's nice to know. You may know someone who can take advantage of this and who is eligible to apply. Again, it must be a business that is registered with CIPC, 100 owned by South African citizens. And then in terms of the workers or employees, 70% of the workers must be South African. If 30% are not South African, they must have valid permits, and the business must operate within a township and rural area. And again, there's issues of compliance, because what we're trying to do through this scheme is to ensure that businesses that operate in township and rural areas, so that they do comply, so that we are running a solid system in terms of enterprise development in those spaces. And again, we encourage those businesses to open a business bank account, because in the main, this type of businesses, you'll find that someone who's operating that kind of a business, the personal and the business account is the same thing. So we just said, okay, in terms of growth, if someone wants to grow and see their business going forward, it's good business practice to separate that business account. So in the main, we provide financial support, yes, but again, we also provide non-financial support, because we want to see this business is growing and developing the local economy, keeping the money circulating in the township and creating jobs in those areas. The application process here for TRAP, we've got a dedicated email address where they can apply. It's trap@sifa.org.za, but there's enough information on our website about that. Now, this is the other thing that I need to share before I close, because I then said when I started that we don't need a business plan when you apply for funding. because a business plan is broad. You know, if you go and Google a template of a business plan, there are so many templates of business plans that you can get out there. So what we have done, when I say we, I'm talking about Sifa, the IDC, and the National Empowerment Fund, as well as the National Youth Development Agency. We sat down and said, as lenders, there are certain things that we are looking for when entrepreneurs want to apply for funding. So let's call this a common funding template. What are the things that we do want to see in a proposal if you do not have a contract? So these are the categories. One is we say you need to tell us about the company, company information. That PTY, that CC, you need to give us information about that. And then the other thing that we need to know is information about the directors or shareholders. We need to know about that. The number 3 is about the company structure. In the main, this being the organogram of a company. Because the organogram of a company tells us in terms of the structure, in terms of how you want to run your business. So that we do require, and it assists us to say, okay, now there is someone who will be responsible for operations, someone for finances, etc., etc. And then the other one is the business operations. Some of the businesses that we do support are highly technical. So you need to unpack the business operations. The products and services, what kind of products and services are you providing to your target market or communities? Because this, we believe that if you're in business, you are not there to sell a product or service, but you're there to solve a problem. But you only solve a problem by providing a particular product or a service to your target market. So we need to create, we need to see that link to say your products and services, in a way, you have to be unique. What problem are they solving for customers? Number 6 is about the industry analysis, because we also say that it's very, very dangerous to go into the business that you don't understand or the industry that you don't understand. So you need to understand that industry, the trends, how things operate, and give us a high-level synopsis of that particular industry in terms of the trends. Number 7 is the issue of the target market. Who are you targeting? Because you cannot be for everybody. If you've got a practice, I'm sure that particular practice targets a particular LSM. It cannot be for everybody, as it were. So even in any form of a business, we then say, with this product or these products and services that you are offering, who is your target market? Because this helps us to also understand the spending or the consumer patterns of your target market, so that when you project and saying that I'm going to be making 100,000 a month, it's linked in a way to your target market to say, this LSM that you're targeting, do they have enough money? Do they have enough income or disposable income to buy the things that you are offering? Number 8 is about the marketing strategy. How are you going to penetrate your target market? Because customers out there have got a choice. They've got a lot of choices in terms of where they need to buy certain products or services. So marketing strategy, you need to tell us about that. And colleagues, this need to be very, very practical. Because when you look at this and you're saying, for instance, in terms of marketing strategy, I'm just giving an example. I'm going to be distributing flyers, in the traffic lights. So somewhere when you go into our cash flow, we need to see an expense where you're going to buy those flyers or pay somebody who's distributing those flyers. I'm just using that as a simple example. So if you're saying that now I'll be advertising through radio or community radio station, when we go to your cash flow, we need to see that budget line. The sales strategy is then to say, how are you going to convert these efforts in terms of target market and marketing strategy into rents and sales? Some of the businesses, they sell credit, some cash sales, whatever the case is. So you need to tell us about that. Number 10 is the competitive environment. You need to understand your competition, because there is no business out there that is a monopoly. You need to understand your competition, and then to tell us that what is your edge? Why will people choose your business and not choose the other business that competes with you? And that edge really has to be something that is sustainable. So we do check those kind of things. Number 11, location, again, is very crucial. because as they say in business, the most three things that are very, very important is location, location, and location. So if you are located in a particular area, that location need to be strategic in terms of probably accessibility to your target market, or accessibility to your suppliers, whatever the case is. But the location really needs to talk into the whole business model that you do have. Number 12 is the issue of the external environment. So you also need to understand, because there are certain things that happen outside of your business that will affect your business. Those things could be political, those things could be economic, social, technology, environment, and legal. So in terms of the political environment, there are certain things that can happen out there. On the policy side, there could be decisions that are taken, political decisions, like I said, around policy, that could affect your business. So you need to understand that. The economic, again, macroeconomic, microeconomic environment can change, and that again can affect your business. And I think we've seen this. I mean, what is happening in Russia and Ukraine? We thought it doesn't affect us, but it does. I mean, when you look at the price of petrol, what it's doing is affecting a lot of businesses. The social environment where you're operating from, sometimes the community have got some influence of what is happening in a society, somehow can affect how you run your business. So you need to understand exactly your environment in terms of the social environment that you're operating in. Technology, I think this is, COVID has taught us that we can do a lot of things through technology. It's fast-tracked how we manage to run businesses using technology. The environment, certain businesses, environment is very, very crucial. We talk about green economy now. Some businesses are directly affected by that. The legal environment, things can change in the legal fraternity. Again, you need to check that and see how it affects your business. So the external environment is very, very crucial. Number 13 is the funding requirements. So if you come to Sifa and say, I'm looking for 10 million, you need to be able to tell us how you're going to use that funding. So if you're saying it's 10 million, 3 million will be for capital expenditure, I want to buy equipment, another 2 million is working capital, etc. So you need to then be able to say your funding requirements are X, and then this is how you're going to use the funding, the process of the loan that we do provide. Number 14 here, the financial model. We'll talk about the cash flow projections, your projected cash flow, your income statement, and your balance sheets. And this you don't have to worry that much about, because I'm sure if you're running a practice in this instance or any business in the sector, you probably have a bookkeeper that can assist you with this kind of things. But the bookkeeper will rely on what you're telling them when you're saying that you want to apply for Sifa funding, you'll be making 100,000 rands a month because of this and this and that. All they can do is just to put that together into a financial model that will talk to your cash flow projections, etc. But it's also important for you as a business person to then say, even though they don't have packaged this to be a projected cash flow or an income statement or a balance sheet, but also when you start running your business, or these are budgets, when you start running your business and saying that I had said that in month X, I'll be making 100,000. At the end of that month, if you make 120,000, everybody's happy. But if you make 80,000, then you are chasing a target again. You've got a shortfall. So you need to be able to then say, how am I going to make good of that particular shortfall? So it's not a question of presenting this to Sifa and you get an approval and then it stops there. You need to use this on a regular basis, on a monthly basis to make sure that you are actually on track. And the banking information, most of the clients that come to us have got banking accounts. Some of them have got banking contracts with banks. It could be a home loan, it could be any form of debt. Then we're able to, you need to tell us about that so that we understand how it affects the application that you're submitting to Sifa. Supply information. Some of the clients that we do are relying on suppliers, because if you're relying on suppliers, that value chain is very much crucial. If that value chain is disrupted in one way or the other, it will affect your business. So you need to tell us exactly who are your suppliers. And your suppliers, we do a high level due diligence on your suppliers because they need to be that continuity from the suppliers that you are not frustrated. If you're running a pharmacy and you've got a supplier we need to understand exactly that value chain, it's a solid value chain. Number 17, the staffing, the people working for you, we need to know more about that. The compliance environment, I think this I did cover. And last but not least, the SWOT analysis of strengths, weaknesses, the opportunities on your side. So if you can cover this in your funding proposal, then half the battle is won, if not more than half the battle is won, because these are the things that we look for. We do have a template of this, which unpacks, for instance, when I talk about number 3 and I say company structure, it tells you exactly what do you need to put under that company structure. So Dr. Nki will share that with the presentation, and then the colleagues, if you want to get more information on this, you can have that Word document that can guide you. So I think that is that from my side. Those are our contact details. We do have a website if you want to get more information about what I've presented, you can visit our website. We have a switchboard. You can also drop us an email, helpline@sifa.org.za. Maybe you've applied and you're not getting joy, you can drop an email under complaints@sifa.org.za. Actually, I manage also the team that looks after that email in terms of complaints. And we are also on the various social media platforms, like Twitter, at the Real Sifa, Facebook, it's more Enterprise Finance Agency, and also we are on LinkedIn. So thank you very much, Doc. I'll stop here. And I think the real work begins now when you start asking questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mashele. That was very illuminating. And the chat box and the Q&A is buzzing with questions. So colleagues, as we were listening to the presentation, we were just looking at some of the questions that are being posed on the chat and in the Q&A. And colleagues, just to get us started, I'm going to pose a couple of questions to Mr. Mashele. And these are, the themes that seem to be running through the comment section, the chat section and the Q&A. Once we have covered these questions, we will also give the colleagues who had raised their hands an opportunity to ask if their questions have not been answered already. So colleagues, I will pose the questions based on what you've been asking on the chat, and then we will give the colleagues who raised their hands a chance. Mr. Mashele, let me start off with the first question that I saw in the Q&A, which I think for many of us is very key. The question simply is, what is the difference between bank applying for a loan at the bank and Sifa funding? So I will pose 3 questions and then you can answer and I'll go to the next. So that's the first one. What's really the difference between bank and Sifa funding? The second question or cluster of questions related to eligibility. And there were questions around, do you fund startups? There was a nurse who asked, as a nurse wanting to open a private clinic, would you fund that? And there was also a specific question around land acquisition. So Mr. Mashele, please just clarify on the eligibility, maybe just re-emphasizing what is funded and what is not funded. And the last question I'll pose before we take your response is the big question of support. There's been a lot of comment around what support is available when we apply for funding. I think a lot of us saw the 20 questions or the 20 items that we need to deal with. And as clinical people, we are intimidated where we are, because we are seeing things around marketing strategy, competitor analysis, the environment, and these are the things that we really don't have a good grasp of. So Mr. Marshall, maybe if you can expand also on that one in terms of what support is there for us to develop a winning proposal or funding proposal. I'll pause there for now. Thank you, Mr. Marshall.
No, thanks, Dr. Ntia, appreciate it. So the first question is about the difference between banks and Sifa. So before I talk about the difference, let me talk about where we are not different, because it can clarify. So we are not different between a bank and Sifa when it comes to the issue of compliance with the National Credit Act. So remember now, the National Credit Act, amongst other things, it talks about affordability. So the issue of affordability says you cannot provide a loan to a business that cannot afford a loan. That is the law. So when it comes to assessing affordability, we are exactly the same. You know, we will ask questions in terms of, can you afford this loan? And I won't go into detail because that is part of the framework that I presented at the end, you know, the funding template. So in terms of us, affordability, we are not different. Where we are different is we are here to address what is called market failure. And the market failure is to support those businesses that are not able to access commercial credit. One, because they do not have security. You know, if you go to a bank and apply for funding, the first question that bank will ask is security. You know, if you can cover things rent for rent, then the bank will listen. But with Sifa, we don't even ask that question. The first thing that we ask is about, can you afford a loan? Remember now I was talking about the cash flow projections, et cetera, et cetera. Security is not a requirement for Sifa. Unless you've got security, we will take it. I mean, you cannot hide security and want to use taxpayers' money. Because remember now, you and I own Sifa. This is a government institution. We are using taxpayers' money. So we are different in that we don't fund based on security. We provide what we call risk capital. And risk capital is then we give you a loan and say, go and run this business because you have presented what we think can work. You know, if it works, then it's fine. Everybody's happy. If it does not work, we have, I think this will cover slightly part of the support. So if it doesn't work, one is we have got a workout and restructuring. We start with mentorship. So back office, we've got a team that will do mentorship. We've got a team that will do workouts and restructuring. So if your business doesn't work, you know, we go all out to try and restructure this business to make it to work, to save your business and save the jobs that are in that particular business. So that is the support that Sifa will provide. But the main difference really is then to say, we don't fund based on security. The risk that we take it's a higher risk than what the bank will take. And not to say we're better than a bank. A bank is not supposed to take that risk. I mean, a bank is using shareholders' money, it's using your money and my money, so that, you know, a bank can say you go to an ATM and you withdraw, no, I've borrowed Mr. Marshall loan, you can't have your money. You know, it doesn't work like that. So a bank, for the right reason, they have to work in that space that says when we provide funding, we need to be sure that we will get it back. But Sifa is different, it's developmental in nature. The issue of eligibility, yes, we do support startups. And I need to be honest, they are very difficult to support because as a startup, you don't have any track record. You know, it's a greenfield. So when you have got a startup idea, as it were, the template that I have shared, you just need to make sure that when you complete that, you know, it's very, very convincing and comprehensive. Now, the other thing to also check is we work very closely with our sister agency, SEDA, Small Enterprise Development Agency. Now, SEDA provides the support because Sifa is about access to finance, but how these institutions are designed or structured is that SEDA needs to help entrepreneurs with business plans, with making sure that their proposals are funding ready. When you come to startups, SEDA also has certain tools that they can take your startup a business or your startup initiative and then put it to that particular tool and be able to say, are you ready? Is this business doable in a sense before it even comes to Sifa? So in terms of support, SEDA, that is why we work alongside SEDA, you know, to say that when SEDA comes here, they will be able to unpack the support that they provide. And that question, maybe when Sifa is here, please raise the same question that Sifa was here, and Sifa was saying, you guys do the pre-roll support so that they can go deeper in terms of that. I also don't mind to be to come and join that, that webinar, just to observe so that we don't talk things that we pass each other. So what I'm saying, Dr. K, is that we do startups, yes, but they're very difficult to do. It's a reality. So make sure that when you do a business plan or a funding proposal, it's very comprehensive. And in terms of the support, you need to take it to a nearest CEDA branch. They will look at it. And once they've done that, they've allocated a service provider to assist you with that. And then once it comes to us, it's ticking all the boxes. So that is that by way of support. The land acquisition, you'll tell me if I'm not answering the question. But here I'm thinking about, because what I did say in terms of eligibility, I spoke about primary agriculture. And then I said that in terms of primary agriculture, we don't fund primary agriculture if you don't have an offtake agreement. So what we mean by this, let's say you're planting tomatoes or cucumbers, whatever the case is, you need to demonstrate that you have got an offtake from Pick and Pay, as an example, because what we don't want is a risk where you plant and harvest and you're still looking for a market. Those things have got a very short life, shelf life. By the time you find a client, maybe those things they've lost, they're no longer sellable, so to speak. So, but now it doesn't mean that it's all lost, because I was also saying, if you are in primary agriculture and you do not have an offtake because you really depend on an open market, so to speak, then we've got partners under our wholesale channel, and our partners they do play in that space. So yeah, if that answers the question, I'm happy to proceed. But if it doesn't, Doctor, you can just maybe indicate. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mashele. I believe we are answered. However, if there are any outstanding, questions on the support, we can always take the comments from the colleagues. We will share with the colleagues which webinar, we are planning next. And maybe while we are there, let me just say it up front, colleagues, we are planning to have a webinar with CEDA so that we can, as Mr. Mashele was saying, we can unpack the kind of support that is available for us to be able to write the business plans and make sure that when we submit our funding proposals, they are as tight as possible. So that is still coming, and we will share the date as soon as we are finalized. Mr. Mashele, let me pose the next set of questions, then I'm going to go to hands. There's also questions that are being raised around timeliness. And the first one is the period or the time it takes from putting in an application to actually acquiring the funding. So that is one issue that we just need to understand. How long does the process takes? And another question related to timelines is regarding the grace period. If one is granted funding this month, by when should we start with the repayments? Is there a grace period that is worked in or that can be negotiated so that one can really get going with the business before they have to honor their funding commitment? So that is the one question on timelines. And there was also a question regarding what happens after the funding has been granted. There are two issues that came up. The first one is there any oversight that is provided by the agency to check if the funds have indeed been used for what they were intended for? I'm not sure where this question comes from, but that's how the question came. Is there any oversight to make sure that the funding is used for what it was intended for? And related to that is, now we are talking about post-funding, is a question around what happens if one cannot honor the financial commitments. I think you did touch on it a bit, but I think maybe it would be great if you could just lay it out, Mr. Mashele. What if you've provided the funding and I'm struggling with the repayments? So I'm going to stop at this point and allow you, Mr. Mashele, again to give us some feedback, and then we are going to go to the raised hands. Over to you, Mr. Mashele, the timelines and the oversight, or what happens after the funding has been granted.
No, thanks, thank you. So in terms of the timelines, there are two issues. Remember I said we've got asset finance and term loans where you do not have a contract. So in an instance where you do not have a contract, where our deal makers must still go out to do research, not research, but due diligence, etc. We're looking from application to approval between 30 and 40 working days. Provided that, remember the list that I have shared in terms of documentation, provided that you have given us all the documents, because our reality and experience is that applicants will give you out of 9, out of 10, they give you 8 documents and then they want an answer. So this, we need to work together to get to that 30 days or 40 working days in terms of timelines. If you have a contract, it's shorter, because if you have a contract, the amount of due diligence that you do, it's not that deep, because there is already a market. So there you're talking anything between 15 to 20 working days, so it's a bit shorter. But what I must say is that we are in the process now of automating our processes as our frontline process. So once we've done a lot of automation, these turnaround times will actually improve. And what led to the automation, amongst other things, is the issue of COVID. Like I said, for the past 2 years, most of us were working from home, but we couldn't stop the business. Businesses, that's where they needed the support in terms of the relief schemes. So we had automated some of the things, but we're saying now, let's do it properly. But to answer the question, Doctor, is that turnaround times between 30 and 40 working days if you do not have a contract. If you've got a contract, we're talking about 15 to 20 working days. Again, it's a partnership with our applicants, entrepreneurs. You give us the document, that is the big plus. If you give us that, then you can chase us for those turnaround times. The issue of the grace period, we are able to say we can give you up to 6 months grace period. The grace period being the capital and or interest. So remember, when you get a loan, when you pay a loan by way of an installment, that installment is divided into capital and interest. It doesn't matter whether it's a car, whether it's a bond or a Sifa loan. So we can then say, we give you a grace period, but we'll look at the cash flows. The grace period is up to 6 months. It can be capital, it can be interest, it can be both. It can be both. So that is that. The issue of the oversight, yes, good question. We do have a team called the post-investment unit. So each and every regional office has got a post-investment person that after the deal makers have approved the loan and the disbursement has been made, the post-investment monitoring officials are the ones that will go out there to make sure that the money has been used for the purpose intended. If there's challenges with the business, they'll come and feedback to Sifa. So there is a structure in terms of oversight.
Okay, please go ahead, Mr. Mashele. Yeah.
Yes, so oversight, Doctor, yes, there is a post-investment unit. In terms of what happens if the wheels fall off, business life happens. First thing is work out and restructuring. I said, okay, now we sit down with you and say, okay, now things have changed. Let's try to do work out and restructuring. Let's see what we can do to save the business and save the jobs. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't win. I mean, that's reality. If we do win, everybody's happy, then you will have to restructure the business, restructure the repayments, and we will proceed. If then you realize that you cannot knock blood out of a stone, and when things are bad, we will foreclose. We then say, okay, now what security did we take? In most cases, there isn't security. The security will be the assets that we will finance, and then we close the business and we move on. But that is the last resort that we do when we realize that we cannot, like I said, knock blood out of a stone. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mashele. That is very clear, at least to me. But we are going to give the colleagues an opportunity to clarify if there are any areas that are still not clear, or if there are new areas that they need to bring forth. On my screen, I'm seeing a couple of hands. I will start from my left. Dr. Mawela, you will assist. Can we start with Malebo Maponyane? And then we'll hear what the question is and we will take it from there.
Thank you, Dr. Keith. Mr. Mashele, thank you very much. I think your presentation has been very good. It's given us the highlight, but I must say that it was generally touching on just about every industry except health specifically. Doctors were not very stood up on business issues. Maybe I'd like to ask you maybe to tone it or bring it down closer to our industry and maybe just let us know what kind of businesses around health have been funded successfully before, or what is it that we need to avoid in terms of the health sector? What kind of businesses will not be funded, for instance? I think that for me will be much more helpful.
Okay. Thank you very much, Malebu. Mr. Mashele, are you okay to respond before we go to the next question, or would you like to take a couple of questions and then you respond to 2 or 3?
I think Dr. K, let me respond. It will move quite faster if you allow me. So yes, in terms of, because what we can't do, we can't say avoid this business and do that business. If I'm getting the question, okay. Because in terms of the health sector, there is no exclusion from SIFA. We can fund any business in the health sector. So that is the first thing. But I'm hearing Mema Lebo Maponyane to be asking, in terms of certain businesses, what businesses to avoid. I think that's what I'm hearing, to say avoid this kind of business, avoid that kind of business. So you can help me if that is the question that is being asked. And if that is the question, unfortunately, that we cannot do. We cannot blacklist businesses, to then say this you can do, this you can't do. What I can say, though, is that in terms of the sector, there is no exclusion in terms of the health sector, unless maybe you're manufacturing alcohol, and that's not the sector that you guys are in. So if I'm not responding to the question, please come back. But my response to it is that the health sector will cover all businesses. But what we cannot tell you is to say avoid this business, don't do that business. We can at some point, is that we're not prepared for that. If we come back, invite SIDA, I'm prepared to come back and give that. To say in terms of the performance of the book, which sectors are performing well and which sectors are not performing well, because that information is there. We can tell you that maybe avoid the retail sector, avoid this kind of, but that we can do. I don't have that information here, but we can come back when SIDA comes back and share that information.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Machado, what I was trying to say really was, do you have examples of any health-related businesses that have been successfully funded previously, just so that it gives us an idea on what potentially could work and what couldn't work. I also wouldn't want to go in with a wild idea only to find that it's not really covered under what SIFA would fund. I don't know whether that's clear, but otherwise it's something I could follow up on my own. I just thought maybe you might have examples of what has successfully been funded previously on the health sector.
Yeah, can I just assist with that? It's Dr. Mawela. I saw a number of maybe specific questions and comments. I saw a sister saying, I'm a nurse. Is this funding applicable to me in terms of starting my own private clinic? And then I think I saw one post talking about this company that is doing educational materials through animation. I guess they're using graphics and probably from the film industry, but they're using that kind of technology to do health education or even for training and so on. So I think the question Malebu is trying to assess is, to what extent, can a GP practice who wants to establish X-ray services, so it's an established practice, they want to establish an additional service, can they apply? or it's a newly qualified doctor, he wants to start their practice, obviously this one is a startup. So it's a question of, do you support and fund startup professional services? And then lastly, there was a very important question, because most health professionals are registered as either, practice number with a BHF kind of a thing, not necessarily a PTY. So would that be acceptable, or do they always need to have some form of a CIPC registration? Because remember, for professional services as health workers, it's not always mandatory to have a PTY or CC, but people do open their practices using practice numbers and so on. Yeah, so maybe let's keep the discussion around that kind of a discussion, a health service versus a technology company in the health space. What is CEDA's response to that? Thanks.
Yeah, through you, Dr. Ki, and thanks for the clarification, Dr. Moe. Let me start with the simple one, the practice number. So the practice number, yes, we can fund that, because if you register by a practice number, it's more like you run a business as a sole prop in a way. There's no need for you to have a CIPC. And we've done quite a number of transactions during the COVID relief, when we do the COVID relief, where the scheme, and when we're doing the, when there was this looting in KZN and Gauteng, a lot of doctors did apply, and then we use the practice number. So we can use the practice number. That one is fine. The other one, yeah, because my response to, okay, a startup, we can do startups. I think there was what you were trying to clarify, Dr. Moore. The startups we can do. Again, I say it must have a very strong business case based on the framework that I've presented. So, and again, I do understand that when I go through that framework, if you are not in the field, some of these things can be a bit tricky to understand. But that is when we come back, we see that those things can be unpacked in a practical way. So to speak. But now the other things really, there could be questions that are transaction specific. In terms of saying, okay, I've got this, I want to do that, etc., etc. If it does not fall outside of our expertise, it can be done. I think that is the principle. So what I'll suggest we do, Dr. Gide, in the interest of time, let those transaction-specific questions, you can drop me an email personally, and then I can look at it and say this, and we can guide it this way. Because what I cannot tell you now is, in terms of the portfolio in the health sector, how big is our portfolio? I don't have that information. That information can be made available at a later stage. But now, if you have got a transaction-specific question, I will leave my email address. Then just drop me an email, give me background, and then we'll be able to answer that. And it will be good in a webinar like this to have broad, generic questions in a way, but specific ones, my preferences, just drop me an email, and then I will respond to it personally.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mashele. I'm really happy about the way this discussion is going. Colleagues, in the interest of time, I didn't share the background of how this webinar came about, but let me just share briefly so that we can just get a sense of where this is going. The reason this came about, colleagues, was a discussion I was having with the Minister of Small Business Development, and she was just allaying her concern, or she was sharing her concern with me regarding the paucity or the lack of applications that SIDA and Sifa are getting from medical professionals. So colleagues, in that discussion, we then saw that we needed to have an information sharing session like this one. But my personal sense is that us as healthcare providers, we are very, how do I say, we are very constrained in terms of what we think can be funded. colleagues, anything really that we are doing that is within the guide that Mr. Mashele gave us, where it's not illegal, it's not related to syntax, anything that we are doing can actually potentially be funded. Whether you are starting your practice, whether you want to open up a hospital, whether you have a practice but you want to expand it, whether you are a gynecologist, a neurologist, whatever it is, colleagues, I'm going to urge us to just put in an application and test the waters, and then we will be guided in terms of what is not allowed. But can we operate from the premise that everything that is not illegal or related to the syntaxes is actually applicable? So colleagues, I will leave it there in the interest of time, but please have that in mind, that we need to put our applications in. We are not visible, and almost everything goes except for a few things. Let me acknowledge RA helps. Your hand is up. Can you please pose your question? RA helps.
Rahel is Rahel or Rahel?
Rahel PS. Okay, Rahel, while you are trying to unmute, let's go to Tulimnisi. We'll come back to Rahel. Tulimnisi, you can unmute. Okay, Tulimnisi is...
Whilst we are dealing with the hands, just a quick follow-up, because I saw a question about someone acknowledging the support they received from Sifa regarding the July unrest. And I think a lot of, particularly private GPs, did apply for that. It was just an open question to say, is that opportunity still open for those who were affected but who might have missed the earlier timelines?
So if I may, Dr. Mawel, no, that opportunity is gone. Remember that program was responding to the problem at the time. So that budget is gone, and yeah, it's no longer available for those businesses.
Okay. Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Mawela. Let me come back to the hands. You can help me with the chat if there's something else we've missed. We are going to just take another maybe 5 minutes or so. Tabang Mongale.
You may unmute, Tabang.
Okay, yes. No, thanks, Doc. Actually, my question is around, because most of the fundings, especially those that are linked to government, sort of, they exclude people that will say, maybe if you've got a business that's running and then you want to apply for funding, they will exclude on the basis that maybe you are a public servant. So I just want to check with this one, when you have a startup that's in progress and you are still a public servant, does Sifa considers those applications, or is it an exclusion criteria, or the requirement maybe to say after the funding you need to immediately be full-time in the project?
Okay, if I may respond, Dr. King, can I go for it?
Yes, please, you can go ahead, Mr. Marshall.
Yes, yeah, I think this is a good question, because in one of the slides that I shared, I said the businesses that we support, the entrepreneurs must be an owner manager. You know, so you can't keep a job and do this part-time. So you have to be an owner manager, and by implication, it means that you have to be there to run a business. You can't keep a job and run a business on the other hand. So by implication, you are excluded if you want still to keep a job and run something on the side, you know, for a number of reasons. But that is the response, unfortunately.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mashele. Rahel, are you there? You can unmute.
I doubt, Dr.
Okay, all right. Colleagues, we have had a very informative discussion. Dr. Mawele, let me know if you see anything we haven't covered, but I think the more global issues, the bigger issues have been covered. Perhaps the ones I'm seeing on my side are issues that are, specific to specific businesses, which Mr. Mashele has already dealt with, that those businesses or those questions can be directed to him directly. So if there is nothing else, I see one hand, and we shall take the one hand. And yes, Dr. Mawe?
No, I was saying, do take that hand. I've allowed Nompumelelo to talk. Okay. I'm not sure.
All right, Nompumelelo, please go ahead.
Good morning, Dr. Nki. Mr. Mashele, thank you very much for the session and sharing all the information you've shared. I just wanted to know, with regards to the ITC people listed there as bed payers or, or blacklisted, is this for the business or the individuals, the directors of the business? How do you look at it when you are doing the exclusion criteria? Is it the business's ITC or the directors, the shareholders of the business?
Another good question. It's actually both. We check the business, we check the directors or shareholders of the business. But let me be clear that in terms of, remember I was saying that in terms of a default judgment with arrangements, we can do those transactions. It's only a court judgment that is not rescinded. And by this, it's a court judgment, it's still standing, you haven't settled it, then we won't be able to touch those transactions. But to respond to your question, it's actually for both the directors and the company. Because remember now, the company is a legal entity that is actually run by directors. So whatever the company is doing is actually a behavior of the directors one way or the other. So it's actually both to respond to your question.
And maybe just quickly, there was a small question around that to say your interest rates, are they linked to the risk provided by the credit score of the applicant, or they are fixed irrespective of the credit score, something like that? Yeah.
Okay. So Dr. Mawele, the interest rate it depends on the program. I presented certain programs like your TRAP was in the township, the Amorphous one for entrepreneurs with disabilities, the Inyamazan for military veterans, and the one in manufacturing. So those ones have got fixed interest rates. Amorphous is prime less 5, and then the manufacturing program is 5%, and then the TRAP one's also 5%. Those are fixed irrespective of the credit scoring. The other one, the other programs where it's just direct lending normal instruments, those are linked to prime. So it will be prime +1, prime +2, depending on the business plan.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mashele. We have, I don't know, one last hand that we are going to allow, and then we are going to wrap up our discussion. Lutendo, you
hello.
Can yes.
Yes, thanks. I wanted just to know if a great presentation, by the way, if they can be able to share the presentation in case one has missed certain things just to follow as such.
Okay, thank you very much, Lutendo. Dr. Mawela, can you maybe share with the colleagues how we are going to make it available? I'm not asking Mr. Mashele because he has already alluded to the fact that the presentation is shareable. He's okay with us sharing it. So it's up to us now to finalize the logistics.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Yes, once we have received the slides, we hope that by tomorrow we will use the attendance register, the one that you use for registration. So there's actually no need to share your email on the chat. When you joined the webinar, I think the system must have asked you for your contact details. So we will use that to distribute all additional information related to the info session. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, with that, we are going to conclude the discussion. Mr. Mashele, thank you so much for availing yourself and for such a wonderful presentation, and really for taking us through as if we are hearing this for the first time, which is the case. Most of us were hearing it for the first time. Thank you so much for making it so understandable. Mr. or Dr. Mawela, thank you so much for assisting with the logistics of this webinar and making sure that we are live and we are operating without a glitch. Colleagues, thank you so much for joining the webinar. I hope that you really got something great out of it. I hope that a lot of your questions have been answered. And from our side, we are going to have a follow-up webinar with SEDA. So we will communicate with you. We already have your details. So you definitely will be at the front of the queue to know when we are going to have this follow-up with SEDA. Please avail yourselves, colleagues, so that we can really get a sense of how do we get helped when we apply for funding. I know the feeling that you have is the same that I have, that perhaps we are way in over our head trying to apply for funding, but it's because we are just being intimidated by the list. But do not fear, colleagues, help is at hand. SEDA will be with us probably in somewhere in April to talk us through the support that Mr. Mashele was talking about. So colleagues, thank you so much for your attendance, and we hope to see you again in April 2022 when we proceed with the next session, where we will focus on an information session from SEDA. Colleagues, thank you so much. Be blessed, and may your businesses go from strength to strength. Thank you so much, colleagues. Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.